is Hetzel. I'm the author of Season of Lies, Killing the Curse, and a sort of recovering journalist whose new book, Azalea Bluff, will be out later this year. And hey, I have to tell our facilitator I'm not seeing Anderson's picture at all on my Zoom. So sorry for this delay. Well, I'll just go forward. Anderson, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about it. Sorry about the little glitch there, everybody. It's my pleasure today to be talking with Anderson Harp, the author of the new thriller, November 400 CP is Missing, thriller book 6 in the Will Parker series. And Anderson is unusually well qualified to be writing military thrillers. He's a Marine veteran. And first of all, thank you for your service. You really can't say that enough to the folks that stand for our country. This is, as I said, it's the 6th Will Parker thriller, and you don't have to read them in order. Northern Thunder brought Will Parker to life, and the North Korean thriller is actually banned in China. In the Marines, Anderson taught Arctic survival, mountaineering, and was stationed around the globe. And we'll talk more about how those Arctic survival skills maybe fit into the plot of the new book. He was the officer in charge of the Marines Crisis Action Team during the invasion of Afghanistan. He created the USO's Operation Thriller and did 2 USO tours in the Persian Gulf, visiting the troops. His writing has also appeared in the Huffington Post, been on Larry King Live and the Big Thrill for the International Thriller Writers, and he has an MFA in literary fiction from Queen's University. So that's an interesting combination of writing chops and military chops. So welcome, Anderson. And I guess to start out, talk a little bit about the new book and what's it about, and kind of how Will Parker got to where he is in the latest thriller.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for having me. I guess the strategy, so to speak, of how I write my books and my fiction is that I try to wrap a good fiction story around the center pole of the true factual world. And this most recent book is really wrapped around one of the most interesting poles I've seen in my research and my writing, which is Indonesia and Sumatra. Sumatra is the Western island that is home to like 97% Muslims. The city that is on the far point north, on the far end of the island, is called Banda Aceh. And to give you a sense of things, its name historically has meant the porch of Mecca, or the port of Mecca, because that's where all of the Muslims from the Western Pacific would go towards on their way to Mecca. So you've got that population. You have a certain terrorist element in that population. It is the bookend of what's called the Sumatra Strait, which is the Malacca Strait, excuse me, which is one of the largest Western Pacific road holes for shipping in the world. And then on top of that, you have the combination of one of the most violent faults in the world is right there, the great Sumatran fault, which is caused on December 26th of several years ago at 7 o'clock in the morning, a tsunami to blow through Banda Aceh and caused the death of over 100,000 souls. And then to put the anchor into it all, that is where Malaysian Flight 370 was heading when it disappeared, with more than 200 souls from the face of the earth. So my stories have been that William Parker served in the Marines. William Parker is a pilot. He likes to fly in Alaska because it's one of the last great tests of true good flying. And then he gets called into missions or requests, sometimes from family members who have a Marine that was on, in this case, November 400 CP, an aircraft that get no ending to what happened. And he's asked for and reluctantly oftentimes steps into the fray to find out what's going on. And one of the other benefits of this hero is that he is a polyglot, which is he is a multi-language person. He's very natural with multi-languages. So he can fit into many scenarios around the world that some of these other heroes that are in our fiction books can't really fit into. So he's the right person for the right job.
Kind of reluctant. He really doesn't want to get involved, but he kind of has to help a brother, as I recall.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost the Joseph Campbell wrote the great book about heroes, which became the anchor for Star Wars, I believe. And it's what we call in writing the hero's journey, which is oftentimes the hero is in his own private life. You know, he's had a lot of bullets shot at him over the years, so he doesn't really care to jump back in the fray. But then there's something that calls him into the mission to take on the responsibility.
You know, one of the things I always like about really good fiction, particularly thrillers, is they take us, besides the adventure aspect, they take us to exotic places we may not ever be able to visit or are unlikely to ever visit. Now, I've been to Alaska, but not to the remote corners. And I've never been to Indonesia, and certainly not the remotest parts of Indonesia, which is, you know, where your book is focused. So how much have you been to these places yourself, and how much additional research did you have to do to make it seem authentic and real?
A little bit of both. When I was last command of the Marine Corps with the Marine Forces Pacific, that covered that part of the world. When I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, as you mentioned in the introduction, I was an Arctic survival teacher at a place called Bridgeport, which is the Marine Corps' Mountain Warfare Training Center. It's probably by helicopter, maybe 60 miles south of Lake Tahoe. And it's where Marines have trained themselves to handle cold weather. And then as a part of that, I was sent to Alaska to the Army School. And I think it was Fort Greely at the time, which was 44 degrees below zero, you know, survival type of training. So that, a little bit of that, and of course with Google Earth, you can actually walk the straits that you import into your books as well. But you're right, I really enjoy putting you in Moscow, or putting you in Banda Aceh, or putting you in Somalia. And it's sort of fascinating to me, some of the stuff that comes up from that walking the street type of experience.
Yeah, Google Earth is one of the great inventions of all time for authors on a budget or who don't have time to travel. I've done a little bit of that myself.
Right.
Remote roads in Idaho and Bali.
One other little experience that was interesting was that when I was writing the first book about North Korea, of course, North Korea is, you know, the closed door, and my research found a Russian student that spent a summer there, and he had a diary where he walked the streets, and he very detailed described stuff that me with a former top secret clearance could never go to Pyongyang and see. So, I mean, there are those little gems that you can find sometimes that really add to the insights.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the Malaysia Airlines flight, which I think is one of the really intriguing subplots in the book. And I actually, because I'm hopefully a curious person as an author, I actually went out and did a little homework myself after I read the book, and your description of how there were two people on the flight who had fake passports, Iranian passports, as I recall.
I think one was Italian and one was Austrian, and they were Iranians that were on board that flight.
So it kind of raises the issue of, you know, was terrorism involved in the crash versus kind of the suicidal pilot theory. And so how much of what's in the story is accurate or just an extension of your speculation about what might have happened?
Well, it is accurate that there were two Iranian students that essentially snuck on board with fake stolen passports. The investigations discount that, but who else could, like we said in the beginning, where does fact be more strange than fiction? That you would have two in the airplane that are from Iran, supposedly trying to make it to London, and they've got fake passports. You got the aircraft that just disappears from the face of the earth. My plot line, my story has a similar aircraft that seems to disappear, but then you hear the rest of the story, so to speak. So, I mean, that part of it, of course, is fiction that is tied to fact, and gives an interesting scenario to that. There are a lot of islands north of Banda Aceh, which I think you mentioned one time. Is interesting that those are actually apparently owned. A lot of them are owned by India,
Right.
and that the India sends its patrol boats and all on these islands. But there are just a lot of islands. There's a lot going on in that world. Chinese submarines have been sighted in that area. A lot of that ties back to the Malacca Strait being right there. I mean, that is a real hot point. And of course, in the book, there's an attack on a ship in the Malacca Strait, which is very plausible. I hate to say that my books, could predict the future, but I've had the CDC in them, and I've had some in them, and I've certainly had North Korea in them, and now I have, 2 books back, I think I had Russian hackers in them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's always interesting, and we, talk about the craft of writing a little bit. How has Will Parker evolved? I think as you get into a series book, characters evolve and grow just as we do as people. What was he like in the beginning, and how has he changed?
Well, that's an interesting point. At the beginning, he was extremely reluctant. He had left the Marine Corps. He went on to law school. He became a district attorney. He prosecuted felons in the state of Georgia. He was in a different world. He also, though, has a little bit of a tidbit that is the driving force, and he was essentially one of the first victims of terrorism. Not to give away too much of the storyline, but his parents were on Pan Am flight, I think it was 103. So he had an unsettled motivation. And then he was brought back into the special operations world because he had certain knowledge that was unique to him. And that led to the first mission, Northern Thunder, which, like you said, has been banned in China. I think I'm up there with maybe Mark Twain. I think maybe J.D. Salinger has been banned in China too, I think. But anyway, and then that led into future stories about how then Marines that had lost someone, or Army or Navy that lost someone that didn't have answers to the questions, found out, after they were turned down by the federal agency, we have no answer. The Department of Defense, CIA, NSA, FBI, we have no answers. Then somebody suggests, why don't you call Will Parker, and he gets the answers.
So how much of you is in Will Parker?
Well, my wife would say a whole lot more. Wish there was more to it, but it's funny. I took this on not too long ago in comparing heroes, so to speak, like Jack Ryan, or Jason Bourne. And one of the other things I mentioned about trying to tie a lot of factual basis to the character, to the storyline is, Jack Ryan has had great success. Clancy has had great success. He was a CIA analyst who had hurt his back in, I think, a Marine helicopter crash. Parker, if I were hiring someone to find out the answers to a lost child or a lost husband or brother, Parker physically been a successful marathoner. He is a multi-language linguist. Because of his experience on active duty with what we call Anglico, which is the Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Teams. He has a small team of people that would follow him anywhere. So he has the support life that follows him anywhere. So, if I were in this situation and I lost a brother, he'd probably be the guy I'd call first. Sorry, Jack Bryan, I apologize, but
You're going to call Will.
2 million readers that read him, but
Not that you wouldn't call Jack, but you're going to call Will first.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What are the, and I get that completely. I would vote for the president in my books, you know.
Right, there you go.
So one of the challenges of writing a series books is, you know, it's kind of a juggling act. A certain number of readers are always going to discover them out of order and read them out of order, and then maybe want to go back, which of course is what you hope. But then on the other hand, if you know, so you're in your 6th book, how much background do you give without boring the people who already have read the first 5 versus giving enough backstory to someone just discovering the series for the first time? I mean, how do you juggle that?
I think that's where the team comes into play, because when he's approached, sometimes he's approached by one of his team members that usually they don't just call up Will Parker in his lodge in Alaska. They hear of him and they call up a Gunnery Sergeant Moncrief, Kevin Moncrief, which is his sidekick guy, and say, "Can you get me an audience with Parker? Here, I lost my husband. I don't know what's going on." So that gives a vehicle to sort of reintroduce Moncrief. Which, how do you reintroduce Moncrief? That is that Moncrief was with him on his air naval gunfire team in the early part of the Persian Gulf Wars. So that is a way to do it. Then he brings in another player and brings in another player. So you try to subtly sort of introduce the backstory through this introduction of those characters. Sometimes you introduce him directly.
Yeah, and I'm sure you hear from people who have read the earlier books and have feedback and thoughts for you. It's kind of fun when you develop that audience, isn't it?
Well, that, and you also hear from when you submit editorial changes to your publisher that don't get made. I've got one where we found a mistake where we call meningitis a virus instead of a bacteria. We submitted the change, it never made it. So I hear from physicians every once in a while that.
Yeah, and you know, and the thriller writers, you know, the international thriller writers, and I've been to a couple of the conferences, always caution you, especially when this is probably easier for you than me, because I didn't serve. When you're writing about weaponry, you better get it right. You better know what you're talking about. When you're talking about guns and ammo.
David Morrell, a good friend of mine, has been very generous to me and is a great writer. He's the one that wrote First Blood, which created Rambo. You know, and we have the same type of conversations. You know, he says, I did not use a anti-aircraft missile out of the backside of a Huey helicopter. You know, some of that stuff in the production of the stories, some of that stuff for those that go to Hollywood. Certainly Hollywood takes great license to things. But I can say what started me this off, ironically, was that I was reading a book about the Pentagon that I thought, being in the Pentagon, was so far off. I said, well, let me take a shot at this. I'll at least put the door in the right place where there's a wall.
Well, you get a little poetic license, but there is a larger point, because I feel like unless you're writing like totally out there science fiction or something where it's all, or fantasy, when you're writing about things that people would know and it's wrong, for those people that know it's wrong, it's a speed bump. So even if they kind of forgive you for it, it interrupts the mojo of the story, I guess would be the way I would put it. It just interrupts the flow. Like, so if you say, Main Street, and they know it's Main Avenue, you've interrupted something. And so I think it is important to try to get the things that are right.
Well, and there are several successful writers that go so far to the point of fiction that's a safety net. Clive Cussler, I think, his stories are so far creative, that he almost has a license. I was trying to think, somebody recently I was talking to that, he said, I put my character in a made up county, with made up streets. Of course, in this day and age, there's probably, you might intend to do that, but
Yeah.
you're not naming a county in Iowa that you didn't realize existed. But yeah, I try very hard to keep it straight, and particularly from my experiences, some things really stand out that I try to get right and protect. Usually when I venture into other areas, that's when, I may get something that's off, but you're trying to have a continued high-paced novel that hopefully the people get a better feel for the pacing in the story than
Right.
necessarily a speed bump, as you say.
Yeah, and I always say, impossible. If something is impossible, that could be a problem, but wildly unlikely, that's okay. You're writing fiction.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Or I'd say, if you give me any book, maybe not the Bible, but any other book, I could probably find mistakes in it if I looked hard enough.
Oh yeah, and you mentioned the county. I was thinking about Scott Turow, who's one of my favorite authors who writes legal, thrillers. Kendall County, which is in most of his books, is obviously subbing for Cook County,
Right.
in Chicago, where I grew up. And so yeah, you create some of these fictional artifacts. So while we're on the craft of writing, you've got this master in fine arts, you got this military background. What came first, or was it always kind of intertwined for you? To be
Well, of
doing
course,
this?
the military came first. And as I got into writing, really enjoyed it. Actually, I went to University of Iowa's Writers Workshop for a summer festival. And I had submitted a piece there in the literary side. And the guy that was my class mentor afterwards said, I think you got some talent here. You might want to consider an MFA. And he suggested Queens Queens University in Charlotte, which has a distant learning MFA program. So I went there and had a great time. And it was 2.5 years of creative writing. A lot of part of it is on the literary side. I just had a small nonfiction piece published in a website called We Are the Mighty about the first Navy ship that had an all African crew that served in World War II. And I've gotten some pieces that I've written that are literary based that I just haven't had a chance to really pursue to find them a home yet. So the reason I did all that was to get a better skill level, a better understanding on writing characters, and scenes, besides just the thriller world.
Yeah, for me with a background as a journalist, I joke, I was accused of writing fiction a few times. The first time I did it on purpose was when I wrote novels. The writing, not that I'm the world's greatest writer, but I'm pretty confident about writing. It's the plotting that's difficult for me.
Really?
It's just kind of making stuff up and really, what we were talking earlier, I think you can get away with a lot more in a movie than you can in a book. Look, at movies are just moving. And so you go, well, you don't stop and think that's completely impossible. That could never happen. How do you, there's the craft of the writing and the plotting. Do both come pretty natural to you, or how do you approach that?
Well, I'll put it this way. It's a lot of fun to me. There's, for those that are studying writing, Hemingway did an interview with the Paris Review back, probably in the 50s. And it talked about his approach to writing. And the thing I remember about it was that he'd like to write very early in the morning. He would like to write from a stand-up desk, and he would take a piece of cardboard and he would plot out the story on cardboard so that he would see where the characters are going. One of the things that I try to do is to have subplots that break up the action, but then they converge towards the end of the story. So you might have this path here, and then there may be another path here, and then circumstances bring them together in a collision or a resolution.
Yeah, I thought the second half of your book was really cool. As I said on the review I did for BookTrib of your book, it kind of evolves into, there's like 3 paths. There's the terrorists, there's Will Parker and his team, and then there's the prisoners trying to escape without giving away too much to people
Right.
watching this. And there's this kind of river journey, which made me think of Heart of Darkness, although it's kind of flipped, again, without giving away too much. That's a great narrative structure. You know, you're talking about hero stories. And
great movie if Hollywood is anywhere near.
yeah,
I think it would be a lot.
well, I could, yeah, I mean, I could really visualize what was happening, and I was the back half of that book is really excellent. So I think you should be complimented for that. So what's next for Will Parker? You have anything specific in mind?
No, right now, like I said, I've got two projects that I'm working on. They're fiction based on nonfiction. One of which I'm really excited on, which is a little bit of a change of gears, is I had an aunt that I was very close to all my childhood life that served with the American Red Cross in London in the Blitz and then in occupied France. And I have her diary associated with those experiences. That just absolutely fascinates me. Those times, you know, she came out of Arkansas and left rural Arkansas to sign up for this thing where one of the side stories is I think they were actually transported across the Atlantic on the Queen Mary. And the Queen Mary, Hitler had issued a warrant that any submarine that sank the Queen Mary would immediately get the Iron Cross and a financial reward. But it never happened because the Queen Marys would travel at like 32 knots. And subs in those days were probably at 12 knots. So they could never catch up to it. And there's just a lot of sub stories. The Queen Mary was coming into Scotland at the time, and a British destroyer made a mistake of turning in the wrong direction and turned right in front of it. The Queen Mary cut it in half. So once again, geez, if you can tie that in with a little fiction, that's really got me excited. So I think I'm going to be working on that right now.
That sounds like that sounds like a really fun project. Hey, in the little time we have left, I think I should tell you to show the viewers the cover of your book. I see it right behind you and on your bookshelf. And you know, where is it available? How can people get it?
It is
reach out to you.
author.andersonharp.net is my web page, but also it's available particularly in the iBook format or ebook format everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Kensington Press. They also have a published version too that you can get at least through Kensington. So it's out there.
Yeah. So what didn't I ask? Oh, thank you very much. I just got the cover for Azalea Bluff back, which is the new one, which is a totally different kind of a UFO mystery story. So I'm pretty excited about that. That'll be out later this year. Thank you for showing that. So what didn't I ask you that you wanted to mention in the time we have left?
Well, I thought I'd do something.
That's an old editor question from my journalist days.
Clean up the story. Yeah, I was in my attic not too long ago, and for a thriller writer, I guess I shouldn't be this silly, but this was the first book I fell in love with.
Ah, that's awesome.
And his spaceship. Some people say, how did you start interest in reading and writing? It's all due to Mickey in whatever, a long time ago.
Well, you know, there's a larger and I think important point there. It's the things that get you excited about writing and learning and being curious. I read comic books. I had my old comic book collection, and I sold it to an online comic book broker, and it was hard to let go of them. I was a DC superhero guy.
Yeah.
But you know, that's how I got into reading, you know, as a kid, and then science fiction and sports fiction and so on and so forth.
We hope the excitement of reading will continue on, like, especially in this world of using, their electronic stuff. Reading can take you to places you never be able to go otherwise.
Yeah. And just, to pontificate for a second, as a former, journalist, media person, I think media literacy has never been more important, so that people are able, to discern what's true and what's not, and just have good critical thinking skills. And, you know, in fiction, you can drill into probably some deeper truth even than just,
Right.
you know, just superficial stuff. So,
Right.
with that said, I think we're right at the half-hour mark. Anderson, I want to really thank you for this. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Pat.
We're talking today for BookTrib.com with Anderson Harp, whose new book, November 400 CP is Missing, should be on your I Need to Read list if you enjoy good fiction, and certainly if you enjoy good military thrillers. So thanks a lot for being with us. Really,
good beach read.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that time of year, said the guy who lives by the beach.
Well, thank you again for having me.
Take care.